Back with another video regarding configuration. Today we're going to compare and contrast a clone and own classic method of creating a new structure, a new configuration essentially, with doing it with a configured methodology. On the screen here, I've got 3DExperience connected with our public cloud. Inside this product structure editor, I've got one of our resolved groupings. This is typically how we've talked about this in the past. You've got a base number for what typically would be communicated with the drawing. And then group one would be one particular configuration of that. And this configuration would be, in the case that we're doing here, is going to be something that we're going to modify in order to bring it to a new configuration by replacing a part, but in a way where we have traceability so that the part, when we have a new one, will need to be re-identified. I'm going to replace this main casing part so it's quite obvious, and I'm going to do it with another one that is in red in color. And when we do this, because we need to re-identify, the part will be swapped out with a new part number, but also the top level grouping is going to need to be re-identified. So we're going to create a group 2 from that. Compare and contrast that with a configured methodology where we've got the same exact structure here, at least as a starting point, but now we no longer manage the configuration with a separate item at top, no longer needing to create a new structure for it. We're simply going to make a net change to this in order to swap those parts out, leaving everything else there the same. As a quick review of this as well, let's take a look at what we did, not just in the engineering domain, but also in the manufacturing domain. What I've got in this tab is going to be our resolved MBOM. And we're not going to spend a lot of time on MBOM, but it is going to be important for us to realize that these MBOMs are something that would be created so that when you're making these new configurations, you would then have to create a new configuration of the MBOM because it's essentially a repackaging of what is done in engineering. So I'm bringing up right now the existing EBOM and MBOM using our manufactured items management widget. And here we can see the very same resolved group 1 structure that we had from before. But now on the MBOM side, which is over here, and I'm just going to turn the EBOM side off, we've got it now repackaged into a series of either sub-assemblies or kits, depending on what we're doing. In this case, I've got a hardware kit where if I highlight it, you can see how that's been repackaging the items that were in the engineering structure related to really hardware. I've got one for the springs. Different actuators each have their own subassembly. I can, of course, expand those to see the contents. And we've got some rings that also are in here that are going to be underneath some of those items. We have the same exact thing on the configured side. Let's bring that one up as well so we can compare and contrast it. So here is my group X. This is configured. This is something that's going to be expanding beyond 100% towards 150% to make this overloaded for different configurations. Currently, it's just starting out at the same starting point so that we have an apples to apples comparison. And likewise, we've got each of these items here are grouped in the same exact way. So we've got something apples to apples. And what we're going to be doing is this particular compensator, which I've got highlighted there, that's the one that we're going to be swapping out both in the resolved version as well as the configured version. So we're going to do that, and we're going to show you how easy is it to do both ways, but also the benefit when you start looking at multi-domain connectivity where you've got an MBOM connected with the EBOM, where one method is so much easier than the other because you can roll with these net changes rather than the cloning requiring additional cloning. We're going to start here, and I've already created this because the markup is something that I want to show you as a capability, but it's not really the specific thing that we're trying to accomplish with this demo. What I've done here is I've done a little bit of communication inside of a 3D markup. I created a markup object. And as you can see, as I go to this dashboard, it's going to remember exactly what I had there before. I've got a simple communication that I've got this compensator here where you can see it's pointing to it, and then I'm going to replace that, but I want to have it re-identified. So do not revise. We want to create a new item. And that's going to become important when we get down to execution. So now, based off of this, one of the nice things about 3DExperience is we can go directly using this button here. We can generate a change action, which will be the task that, number one, authorizes us to make this change, and as well, will record the work while we're doing it. So I'm going to create a change action here, and we're going to see what that does as a result. There we go. It remembers the name of the markup. So it's called replace casing markup. I'm just going to remove the markup MU. And we can give it some information about when it's due and so on. I'm just going to give it some information, and then I'm going to go save as draft. This now will create my change action for me. Change action generated with success, which is a good thing. And now if I go to my change tab, where I've got my change execution widget parked already, I can then see what my change actions are. And it's going to show me the one that I just created because it had done that. So there's my replace casing draft change action. And just simply by clicking on it, all within the web browser, I can bring up the change action. Now, as far as members go, I'm the owner and assignee. That happens by default. In this case, I'm going to do something that we would typically configure so that you can't even do it. But just to show you the process, I'm going to also add myself to be the approver. This is where you normally would go and click on the plus button in order to put another approver in place so that somebody else is double checking your work and you're not just self-approving. If you're self-approving, there'd be very little point in doing a change action and change control on it, other than maybe some recording. In the attachments area, you will notice that we have the markup that we just worked on. So this is the context of the change and some instructions, and you can capture it right within 3DExperience. This can be launched, assuming that the assignee would typically be different than the person creating the change. You can immediately just launch it in the 3D markup, and then it's going to allow them to be able to review the change and understand what's necessary in order to be done. So I'm just showing you that how quickly and easy it is to just bring that back up, and it's going to remember exactly what was there that I had placed there when I created the markup to begin with. So you can see the same thing. And of course, this can include multiple screens and so on, depending on the complexity of the change, but this is good enough for what we're trying to accomplish here. Another thing let's look at is the proposed change. Now, by default, when you create a markup and a change action from a markup, it's going to assume that we want to revise that released object. We have no interest in doing that. The instruction said not to. So we're going to just simply remove that proposed change because we're going to create something new from it. And we're going to do that as a part of operating on this change while we do what's called work under, which we'll get to in a minute. So I've got the members done. I've got the proposed change removed, which was inappropriate for this case. And currently in the realized changes, since we haven't done anything yet, this is now in position here to be ready to show you what the changes are, but they're not there yet. What we're going to do now is we're going to go in work. This is where the assignee, now it happens to be me, would be notified that, oh, you've got a new change test to do. You've got something that you need to work on, and then they would get this so they can get to work on it. So now what we're going to do is we're going to operate and perform this very simple change. It's just a simple swap of two parts. Let's go back to there's my replace casing. Let's go back to our product structure editor. And this is where we already have the one that is in there, but it would be a simple drag and drop operation if it wasn't already there. Here is where you can go and say, I want to work under a change action. This is very important because without having the work under, you do not have the ability to be able to be authorized for that change. And there's my change action. I'm going to work under that change. And notice it turns yellow to let you know that it's been doing that. And you can see the replace casing is the work under. Now, in our case, we need to re-identify. Starting point for that is we're going to create a clone of the grouping that we already have. This is the clone and own, which we show you how easy it is to do in 3DExperience, but of course we're going to do this in a better way in the future, but I want to at least show you how to do that. So now that we're working under, the system is going to record for us what we're doing. I'm going to go to the Lifecycle tab and do a duplicate. And duplicate here is, I'm going to just put a little bit of a prefix to it. I do not want include structural objects, because the structural objects would be duplicating the entire structure, including its children. I want to reuse those. They're already released. They're exactly what I want. I only want to create the new duplicate of the group 1, and we're going to have this one be group 2. So just like that, I can do duplicate command. There we go. And now I've got this new group 2 that was put as a prefix. And if I look at the content of it, I'm going to see the same contents that I had before in group 1. It literally created a duplicate for me. And I'll turn this other one off so you can see it. There we can already see I used this I in order to hide group 1, and now I can only see the one that is group 2. And if we go to the change, while we're waiting for that to refresh, if we look at the realized changes now, notice it is captured for us because of the work under that we have created a new group, what will be eventually group 2, but it knows where it was created from, so we can see what it was cloned from, which is great. Now, we're still under work under. We no longer need this group 1 here because we're not going to be modifying it as a part of this. What we want to do now is just make a couple of quick modifications here. We're going to change this to group 2. That's the re-identification. We're going to remove the things that were in the beginning, so now we can see the group 2. Okay, now we're going to replace the casing. There it is. Replaced by existing, and I know I called it red. And there's my red compensator machining. If I want to look at it, I can give it a quick preview. Just to get a quick look to see if that's the one. Yep. So it'll be very obvious. You'll see it's all red. Comes up not just as a image, but this is a 3D rendition of it. But that is definitely the one I want. I click OK. There we go. Now the replace is complete. There we go. And now we can see it's all red. Because I did a replace, it knows to put it right back in the same position, which is nice. And now we can see our entire assembly. And we've really done the very simple thing that we wanted to do. We just wanted to replace something as a part of this configuration, but remember what we had in the past. So now we've got the group 2. If we go over to the change, now we'll be able to see some of the stuff that was modified here. Let's go back into our change action. And now the realized changes, you can see the replace that's happened in there. And this is a little bit misleading because this was created from a new one. There's a whole bunch of new relationships that were created because group 2 was a brand new object, and every one of the children that were there were duplicated as a part of it. But here it's being very clear about what was modified when that was done. So in that case, this is very, very nice and pretty easy to do. Now, in this case, this is in work. So we now want to do one extra thing in order to put this in approval. We need to freeze this so that it will be ready for me to promote it, because you obviously cannot have a change that is undergoing an approval on something that still is being worked on. So now, still working under change, we're going to go to our life cycle and we're going to freeze this item in preparation for approval. There we go. And once again, if we were to refresh this, we're going to see that it even captured that as well. There we go. And now it knows, oh, the change status was done to frozen. So now we've got everything that we need to do in order to approve this change. I'm going to now put this in approval. Takes a second while it does its checking, while it is doing its notifications, making sure everything's in line. There we go. So now that it's been put into approval, and as I'm the approver, what I normally would do here is I would say, bring that up inside of the product structure, take a look at it to see if it's correct. One of the other things that I can do is I can go into the compare area. And just to give you a review from before, we've got the ability to put a compare widget. So everything is right on the web for doing that. I'm going to fit that to give it the best look. And now we can take the items that we had here. We've got the group 1 and 2. I can drag that over to the compare. We can compare group 1, and likewise bring the group 2. Just drag between those tabs. There we go, and you can even see the image is updated. And now we can do a compare and very easily see the difference between those two. Obviously, we've got a difference from properties of the objects themselves, but there you can see the two different items and their differences. Don't show me what's identical, show me what's different, unchecking that, and we can see the differences between these two items. So just as I intended this to do, we're all good here. I'm going to go ahead and close out of that, go back to our change, and now I can go and approve this. Double clicking on that, give it a little comment, looks good, and then approve. Once again, it takes a second while it makes sure that everything's in line. Perfect. Now it's been approved, which in this case, we've got the change action has been completed. If we look at the realized changes, now this group 2, this new cloned item from group 1, has now been released. And we've got the full record of everything that's happened as a part of it, because 3DExperience has work under, which is recording all of it. And then as the approvals go through and the status is changed, they all become related. So very nice. Now let's talk about what some of the challenges of this are. So now we've got group 1 and group 2. Let's bring them both up on the screen. So I've got group 1 and group 2. If I look at group 1 and I go to the relations, which is under the tools menu, relations is going to show me, like I demonstrated before, that you have a manufacturing relationship to the manufacturing bill of material that's in that separate domain. So we've got that, it's got its children. We can peruse all of this in order to see the relationships that have been built there, because that was done before when we released group 1 from a manufacturing BOM perspective. The problem is now that if we look at group 2, we have no such thing. Group 2 is completely new. And now what we need to do is we need to communicate. All we have is a realized change, which of course we know that that's was released as a part of that change. So now we need to, if we wanted to create the M-bomb, we now have to go through and repeat the work that was done already on group 1 into group 2. We've handed that off to usually a manufacturing engineer or a configuration engineer in order to support that. And now they need to go and do all sorts of forensic work to figure out what's different between group 1 and group 2. How did we do this before? Maybe clone this other structure in order to do that, and then regather the items into the M-bomb. A lot of work simply because we chose a clone and own approach, which is the classical way of doing this. And so this is where we're going to do this again, but we're going to do this with the configured approach to show you the compare and contrast and how simple this is, and how the manufacturing bill of material is an absolute snap in order to make that change as well. Now, let's go over to the configured product structure, a quick review on that. And then we'll go through the same exact process. This time you'll see it's a little bit simpler to do, with one extra step with doing the work on the dictionary for how these things are done. So once again, I've got this same structure. We want to perform the same change. If we look at the markup for it, here the markup I chose to do in a slightly different way, using section cuts that you can do, but it's communicating a lot of the same information. This section cut is just another tool inside of the tool area command inside of here, and it's going to remember that cut, and all of these cuts or hides or whatever you're doing inside of here, the annotations that you're putting on here are all remembered as a part of this, and everything is based off of live data connected to what is in the product structure. None of this is a snapshot, just image. You even can rotate it, move it, and so on. So we're going to do the same exact thing here. We are going to create a change action. We'll do it the same exact way. And here we're going to have a little bit of differences here, but we're going to show you that. So we're going to do a configured modification. Once again, we're going to pick some dates, give it some priorities, put that into a change action, which it creates. We're going to go over to our change and look at my change actions. It should have put that in there for me. There it is. There's my configured modification that we just created in draft. Let's take a look at that. There we go. We are in draft mode. This time we've got a proposed change, and we're going to keep it because here this is configured. And so now you can see the operation, rather than being revised, it is simply modify, because modify is where we're going to use our configured approach to evolve this, to remove one item and add another, basically replace an item as a part of this change in a controlled way. If we look at the attachments, once again, we have that markup that automatically gets attached as a part of creating it from the markup. We don't need to go into a whole lot of detail about that. We already saw that a couple of minutes ago. The next thing that we want to look at is applicability. Applicability is where, from a configuration perspective, we can connect the configuration dictionary, or what we call the model, to this change so that everything gets recorded as a part of the evolution of the configuration dictionary or model itself. And we haven't done that yet, and I'm going to show you that in a minute. So let's go back to the model and show you how this is all based. Inside of the model, we have our simple configured evolution that, if we look at the configured structure, using the configuration area, we can see it has been attached to it. So this is what makes it a configured structure, and how the system knows that it's configured, and what is the basis or dictionary around which we're going to be configuring this product, both for evolution or for variation and options and variants, but we're not doing that as a part of this video. So those are in there. We look at the model, and currently we only have model version A. If I click on that, you're going to see there's only one model version. which is A. Now, in our case, this is where we're going to go. Rather than creating a new structure, we're going to go here in order to create a new model version to capture the differences. All I need to do here is to say, I want to create a new revision of this model version. It's going to be just revision B. That's going to keep it relatively simple. There we go. And there was already a product configuration for group 1. What I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to B because we're not there right now. Let's open that B. Right now we have no product configurations. For A, we had group 1 because we want to give it somewhat of the same name, but now we're going to create one that's group 2. And we'll just create that. Now, in our case, for this example, we happen to not have any variability. There's no options and variance. We're simply demonstrating the configured evolution, which is more model version related. But if that was there, you would have that in addition. And then you'd also be able to, when you're configuring this order, this particular configuration, we would be selecting what those options and variants are. In our case, we don't have that. So now that we've got this revision B, we can go and attach that to the change with applicability. So I'm here, I can say I'm going to take this, and if I just start typing it a little bit, it's going to find my simple configured evolution, prompt me, oh, you haven't defined applicability. What are you talking about? This is where we now pick the revision B, and that less than sign means and going on to infinity, as you can see there by that infinity symbol. So now the change itself is related to the evolution of this model version, and we're going to show you how easy this is and how this then cascades to the manufacturing BOM to make their life easier. Now what I'm going to do is I've got this in place with my applicability. I've got my attachments so that I can give instructions. I again need to assign a approver for this. I'm going to shortcut that for now. This, of course, would not be the way that you would work. And then put this into in work. The assignee happens to know myself, is going to get notified, and then we can get to work on making this change. So now we're looking at the configured structure, and we're going to just do a quick review here on the evolution state of what's already there. So expanding this, we can see, I'm going to make this bigger to make it easier to read. Every one of the items, because it was a part of the first time this was done, is related to revision A of that model version. Every single one of those items. We're in the very beginning. If this was something that was a couple of years old or even a few months old, there could be multiple letters here, but we started with A and now we're going to go to B. And what I want to show you is specifically what's going to happen when we take that item here and we do a replacement the same way we did before, how this is going to get handled when we do the configuration switching. Now I'm going to show you another way to do the activation of this. You can, of course, go through the same thing and click the change action, but through the nice user interface, we have the ability to do this with a drag and drop, which I kind of like. It makes it a little bit easier to do. There's my configured mod that's in work. I can drag and drop that onto the work under hard hat, and you'll see that it does the same exact thing as if you would have selected it. To me, that's easier, but we give you multiple ways to accomplish that. And now we're going to do the same exact thing that we did before. We're going to take this item, we're going to go into the edit, and once again do a replace by existing. And we're going to find that red product. There it is, same exact one we saw there before. There we go. And now the same modification has occurred. And what I'm going to show you here is what the evolution looks like on that item. Now what we've got is everything that we've done so far is simply a proposal. None of this is real yet. It appears real inside of the user experience, but none of these things have been completely done because we're waiting on the change to be approved. This could be something that we didn't want to do that we want to back out. This could be something where, no, you replaced it with the wrong part. All that still is in flux while the change is in work. But what it does is it records the evolution rather than being simply for A and onward, which it was originally. We now have this new change action related to it. So the change is what's going to record that for us. The other thing that I want to show here, another one of the columns that we can put in place, which is important, by going to tools, you can configure for yourself what you want to show. We want to show the projected evolution alongside the current evolution. And let me show you what that looks like, because it shows you under the hood what is really happening here. There we go. And now what we've got is the projected evolution is showing that this red item will be for revision B and onward. So when we filter this, it's going to know exactly what to do. Now, this is all that needs to happen. It was very simple and similar to what was done before. The designer simply has to do a replace. It's just behind the scenes, we're doing this in more sophisticated sort of way. Let's also look back at the change, and we can look at the realized changes, and we can see what was modified. Very similar to from before. The only difference is that we no longer have to worry about this item as far as being a new item. It's the same item as it was before. And what we've got is, rather than just replace, it is configured replace. The system knows that's happening as a part of a configured evolution. So we're replacing the non-red with the red one as a part of our demonstration here. And so long as, let's just double check this, the red item is already should already be released. Yes, it's already released. There's not even anything we do here in order to deal with that one item. So we've got everything we need. And we've got the similar compare type of methodology, but when we do that here, the compare is going to be done based off of applying a filter to it, where we can say we want to filter it by configuration to revision A and compare that to revision B. And then on the other side, we're going to open a different filter of this, except this time it's going to be projected because the change is still in flux for revision B. There we go. So you have both of them showing here, and then we can do a compare, and we're going to see the same exact result as we saw before, where you've got the differences showing readily between them. So it gives you the same exact end result that we saw before by the clone and own, except now we're not cloning and owning. It's the same structure, and we've done a simple replace and expanded that overall to include an additional item on top of the existing casing that we had there. There we go. So I've got everything that I want for this in this configured structure. I can see the red item, very similar to before. We can expand it in order to see the various pieces there. I like what I see. I am done working on this. I can remove the change action. I can go into the change and say, I want to put this into approval. And then since I'm the approver and I just did the comparison to make sure that it was what I wanted, I can now go in and simply approve this. Looks good. And approve. Looking at the product structure a little bit closer, after a refresh, we can see that both the old and the new are both in the structure at the same time. And because the change has been approved, we now see that the evolution has been modified here. What we had for the original is now no longer A and onward, or A to infinity. It is capped at B. And the new one is starting at B and going on into the future. And this is the way that we handle simple evolution of our products, whether it's a replace or an add or a remove. You're going to get this behavior once the change is approved in order to put the appropriate effectivities automatically for you, no editing by hand. Now let's take a look at the payoff when it comes to from an MBOM perspective. What we have now, turning on the product assignment status, because we did not create a new structure, we reused the old one. Now what we have is both the old and the new. Old one has already been put in place. All of these other items have already been assigned. They're already in there in some place. And as I click on them, they're already there. There's no work to do in order for the MBOM to adapt to what happened on the EBOM. The only thing that needs to happen, which becomes completely obvious, is the new item is not assigned because it's brand new. As a part of that replace, the old replaced the new. All that the manufacturing bill of material creator, the manufacturing engineer, needs to do is to figure out where the old one is and then also add the new one to that, and they're completely done. Now, of course, this would be done with change as well, but I'm not going to go into this demo. We're already at the 45-minute mark, but I wanted to show you how simple it is to deal with an enterprise change, because everything becomes net changes. There's a net change here that communicates what went out and in, and then all that needs to happen is to deal with a similar change modification on the manufacturing side to account for it, without having to redo all the work that you had and to do a lot of detailed analysis about what's different between group 1 and group 2. They're all one and the same. I hope this has been helpful. Please let me know what you think in the comments. And if you have any additional requests for videos, I'd be more than happy to dig into those as well. Thank you.